Hello, you are tuning into Media Soundwave. My name is Heather Cassidy and today we are joined by Si Lumb from the BBC Research and Development team to talk about the future of media. Thank you for joining us.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Last year we saw Saudi Arabia grant citizenship to the first robot, which is absolutely fascinating. We saw VR headsets and Echo Dots right at the top of the Christmas list. We saw medical advancements with VR. There was so much going on in VR. You also run Manchester VR community.
Right, yep.
Could you tell me a bit more about that?
Yeah, so we 2 years ago started VR Manchester, and really it was an effort to try and meet people locally who were interested in virtual reality. So virtual reality at that time was a couple of years old, mainly in the kind of developer enthusiast community, based on some kind of some innovation that had come out from taking smartphone technology, the miniaturization of screens, and some kind of classic stereoscopic techniques, and producing a pretty good kind of virtual reality image. And you know, that snowballed a little bit, and you got Facebook buying Oculus, you had the Kickstarter.
There was quite a race last year, wasn't there, with the different social media? I know that a lot of podcasts that I listen to were speaking about who is going to be the first with regards to social media to take the next step with regards to virtual reality.
Oh, absolutely. And you know, that snowball effect, the reason VR Manchester came about and the reason it's grown to be over 1,000 members is
Fantastic.
Because of that enthusiasm, that interest in a technology that's genuinely new. So I think that, you know, kind of in our lives as technology enters it, there's a lot of things that are iterative, like social media builds on our social connection kind of desirability anyway. Virtual reality came in, even though it had been in there in the 90s, it came in and...
it'd been, in a way, it'd been around a long time. I remember being a small child and being very interested in virtual reality.
Absolutely, but it was kind of that weird moment where the experience got good enough. And I still kind of count the first time I walked around in a virtual space and looked under a table.
Oh, it's become so far, hasn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, I did virtuality years and years ago in the Chocadero in London, you know, the big arcade general headsets. But that moment where I walked around in a virtual world and it was good enough that my brain was like, yeah, you know, this is fine, this is real. Kind of changed a lot about the way I thought about kind of how things were going to go and where things were going to be. Started VR Manchester as a means to see if there were others who were interested in sharing and learning from one another.
There's some great work being done here by independent game companies, isn't there, with regards to VR?
Absolutely. I mean, you know, kind of we've done kind of well over 12 meetups. You know, regularly 60, 100 people come into the event.
How often are your meetups?
Every 2 months we tend to do them.
Okay, brilliant. And where can people find out information?
Yeah, just search for VR Manchester on Meetup, and you'll find all the information
find the groups there. Brilliant. So tell me about the work that you actually do with BBC at the moment. Tell me about the things that you were doing last year in 2017.
Well, this was, you know, kind of, we built a lot on the virtual reality work. So we released a number of virtual reality products and experiences from kind of really looking at how we might present news in a different way. So we did stuff.
Oh, that's interesting.
We did stuff on the migrant crisis. So this is an incredible story of our time. You know, it's really important that people understand the kind of the gravity of the situation across the globe with the people moving to escape conflict and escape terrible hardship. And that story, because of its ubiquity, can be quite difficult to communicate to audiences who are just bombarded with it. And you know, the sense that virtual reality came along and provided a format that was new. And a story that was important. By presenting that same story in a new format, we wondered whether we could gain you know, more understanding, more empathy.
I was going to say that could provide more empathy and actually give people a shot, because sometimes we know things are going on in the world, but if they're not on our doorstep and we can't actually see it, sometimes our eyes aren't open to it. We can hear it and it just goes over our heads sometimes.
Absolutely.
And we become ignorant with it, really.
I think, you know, it's one of those things, is how do you communicate to someone the gravity of the situation that is facing people who are so far away from your day-to-day? And a virtual reality headset puts you in a new situation, in a new kind of reality, as constructed and kind of representative as it is. There's enough cues there to make you think differently. And it's a bit like that difference between speaking or writing that changes your brain and how it processes information. Virtual reality gives you a new way to interpret kind of information and to kind of experience that story. And we found, you know, tremendous traction with that piece. That piece was called We Wait. We worked with Aardman Studios out of Bristol to do that, and you know, that's available across the virtual reality headsets to have a go at. It's only a few minutes, it's free. And
where can people get hold of that?
Yeah, so just you know, across Oculus Rift, Gear VR, you can find that piece. And in trying it, I hope people kind of had to have a new perspective on it. And we did other work as well. So we've done a whole series of pieces around 360 video. So 360 video as opposed to kind of rendered virtual reality.
I was looking at that on your website. There's a section called Taster, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely.
And on there you can see some of the different things that have been being worked on, and there's part of the 360
yeah,
video
so
on there.
BBC Taster's the BBC's kind of home for digital experimentation. Virtual reality is featured very heavily there, and we actually launched an app last year called Taster VR, which is for interactive 360 video. So video that surrounds you in a globe, your headset or your phone can act as a position within it, you look around.
Yeah.
We tried a lot of experiments, a lot of different content types across that, asking for feedback. You know, one of the things that's really important to the BBC is, and certainly to the research and development team, is to ask the question of what's going to be big next, and actually get ahead by trying that with audiences. I think historically doing things behind closed doors and then presenting them as finished is not something in the digital space that actually
I was quite impressed
works.
that there is this taster section, and it's showing what the thoughts are and what the developments are over the next few years. And also it's gauging people's feedback then, isn't it? Because if these things are being done and they're quite technical, are people ready for these? Do people want this? Or is this actually going past what people are expecting from us?
And actually one of the biggest things is it can break. Like, it doesn't always work, and that's a really hard thing in technology, especially with the BBC has a tremendous history of broadcast, and you turn on the radio and the BBC isn't there.
You'll wonder what's happened.
That's a really big deal. So, iPlayer has to be up all the time, television, radio, always there.
And it's the quality that people expect.
Absolutely.
People expect quality when they put the BBC on. They don't expect any blunders or any mishaps. They expect it to be absolutely perfect. It's truthful. They expect it to be relevant, and it's the branding, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, a lot of those things are still there. The trust, the brand, the quality are all within these experiences. The difference may be that it might be a format we've never tried before. It might be, it could be as simple as we need a new presenter, and we want to try a number of people out, or a new actor, or we're trying a new writer out, or something like this, and giving them a platform on which to present their content that isn't kind of the big thing. I always joked with virtual reality that we needed to do kind of 110 grand experiments rather than kind of £1 million
huge budget and blow it all and not work.
And because that iterative learning is so built into digital development, kind of a lot of people have smartphones and they're used to things taking an update regularly, and so things get better iteratively. And so we're taking the same approach to formats, the same approach to stories, the same approach to technology, and saying, let's work on this. And virtual reality, we made the decision last year to commit to virtual reality over a longer term. So we had an experiment that lasted around 2 years, kind of 18 months, 2 years of looking at it and trying a few things. But we've committed now to saying, well, it needs longer, actually. We need to find out what really is going to work.
It's nice to have it in that incubation period, though, and actually people be able to respond to it and give you feedback, though, isn't it?
Absolutely. And, the BBC has a unique opportunity to do things that are not necessarily kind of chasing the small market. Virtual reality, you see the numbers every day, they differ, how much investment, where it's going to be big, it's for consumers, it's not for consumers. And I think that while all of those things shake out, actually the questions we have are more around what does the medium offer that's unique, and can it help communicate the BBC's public purposes? We have a series of public purposes that drive us, and that all of our media, whether it be radio, online or television, kind of embraces and tries to further. And actually virtual reality may be a way to further those public purposes in a new way. And certainly over the course of my career at the BBC, virtual reality embodies a lot of work I've done on video games, a lot of the work I've done on interactive television and interactive media and online, and presents it in a kind of a new format where you kind of place yourself in a world. And that's that question of, okay, is this a whole new way to tell stories? Is it a whole new way to help people understand themselves, their position in the world around them, and can we use it effectively to do that? And so that there's great piece of work.
You've done quite a lot of work with regards to the convergence of video games and broadcasting. Can you tell me some more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I spent 10 years looking at video games and how they're going to impact our kind of television.
It's a long time in terms
it is.
of tech. Yeah,
it is.
and
it's one of those things. Like I work on games in a TV company, and like, why is it going to have an impact? And one of the ways in which we see that going is that we have a strand of work, several strands of work that are looking at the future of media, based around the idea that all media will be delivered over the internet in the future. So at the moment, you have to modify your house. You put a satellite dish on it, a cable. Someone comes around and drills a cable to your house, or you put a big kind of metal pointy stick on the top and another pointy stick on a hill, sends you some information, and all of that. We've had that for decades, and
that's what we're used to.
Yeah, it's what we're used to. It's broadcasting. As the internet becomes more important, everything starts to run on it. The question of whether you have that dedicated broadcast infrastructure or whether you move that to solely internet becomes more and more important. That's because there is value in the radio frequency broadcast spectrum, certainly for mobile phones.
Is that why quite a lot on the taster section, it just put things onto people's phones, doesn't it, with regards to iOS or Android? I noticed quite a lot on there where it was connecting to people's hands. Yeah, by putting it on the phones.
Yeah, so you can't ignore the rise of the personal screen as being kind of transformational.
How much information we are getting from that?
Yeah, we went from a shared screen. Well, we went from a shared audio experience to a shared screen to some degree of personal computing, but it was still a shared object in some respects. So a personal object capable of giving us a relationship with our media and with our information. And once you embrace that, you recognise that you do things slightly differently for that screen. And in fact, that that underpins with the idea that everything is over the internet. This idea that if you've got a screen and you've got a tablet and you've got a shared screen and you've got a console, you've got all of these things. Actually, the media we produce, so much of it is kind of one size, and it doesn't fit anymore, and it's not as flexible or as personal or as context aware or as information driven as it might be. And so we have this term, this object-based media, which says that actually if you take everything from the beginning of when you create it and keep it in objects, you don't flatten it or package it up. Our great analogy was always kind of imagine a kit of parts that when it comes to you, you take all the bits that you want and put it together for you on the device at the time you want it, with the things you're interested in, with information that's drawn from how fit you are, or kind of what your New Year's resolutions are, or something like this, and gives you media that is for you and is for the device that you're on at that time. That involves a whole change in how we build things. Now we're working on that, and one of the things in terms of the convergence of games is that this idea of media built from objects, and compiled and delivered and composited on demand, looks a little bit like software. It looks a little bit more like the web. It looks a little bit more historically like a build system, like a computer software application. And if we say media tends towards software, then I say we should look at media that is software. Yeah. So video games are software. They may be incredible graphics, may contain video and audio and all kinds of
fantastic what they
logic.
can do with games now.
Absolutely.
It's like you do step into it. It is more like virtual reality, even when it isn't.
Indeed, and that's why virtual reality has been embraced so quickly by the games industry, because they have the flexibility to embrace this new medium, because they're used to that idea of building for these new types of formats of media.
Putting you in a new situation.
Absolutely. Now, because of that, I use my experience and kind of knowledge of video games and the way they're made and the software that they're built from to say that actually the way we make media, recording individual chunks and then flattening it and editing it, actually, if it was all software and was built using a game engine, how flexible would it be? What could we do differently? And so that's the work I've been doing over the last kind of 6 to 8 months.
It opens up to so many more possibilities, doesn't it?
Yeah, and the thing, it was inspired a lot by virtual reality, because the question is, how do you have 1 million people in VR simultaneously? How do you solve a problem like that? And in a research department, solving a problem is kind of and working out whether there's value in it, whether there's a long-term opportunity to bring a new way of delivering a public purpose to the nation.
Because it makes it more fitting to every single viewer as an individual, though, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Personalisation is a huge part of the BBC's mission, to give value to the licence fee payer, to give them something that's relevant to them, that feels personal, to feel like you have a relationship with the incredible content and things that we do. And so, we are looking at how do we bring that personalisation to life. There's a number of projects around that, from things like perceptive media, which my incredible colleague Ian Forrester has been working on, which is a sense of media that reacts to things it knows about you or things it knows about devices or contexts, and that's a really...
It's the data that's being used as well, isn't it? This is a whole new concept that is, now have all these resources at hand, don't we, to actually say, this is what this person likes, this is what they like, and we can actually do something about it by using the data that we have.
Yeah, and we also have to ask the question of what should we do and what shouldn't we do. The ethics of AI. You talked about the robot, Sophia, that was.
I love all the AI and where it's going.
Yeah, and the ethics of data. Kind of understanding how these systems are evolving, what they can be used for, knowing and communicating to our audiences about these developments in a way that helps them understand. We have redeveloped our entire login system for the BBC to try and develop a relationship with the audiences that's open, with privacy policies they understand, with control over their data. And a lot of these efforts and these statements are about helping to bring people an understanding of the world in which they live and the information that they exchange for services in a way that helps them make better decisions, and as well as getting benefits like recommendations and personalisation and content that's appropriate and suitable and exciting and interesting and all of these things. And that is a huge part of what we want to be able to give back, is
make sure you're delivering what is right for people,
and also help them understand what they're being given by others as well. Especially when it comes to things like children's, you'll have seen the Director General Tony Hall talk about what's our relationship with content, what should we be doing to make a statement around the kinds of things we make for children, as well as kind of the distinctiveness and Britishness of our output.
There's a lot being done, isn't there, at the moment with regards to children's media and how to take it forward?
Yeah, absolutely. We recently announced the biggest investment in a generation into children's media, and that's about embracing incredible heritage there and incredible content, but also about saying that by investing in those services, we can present an alternate to something that's driven largely from America. The wonderful services that we've had the benefit of over the past few years are also not necessarily always homegrown services, and they're asking people to make decisions about content, and they're supplying people content that you may not necessarily represent Britain. And so we have an opportunity with the unique position that we're in to take that, and it's one of our public purposes, is to bring Britain to the world. And so with that is, how do we ensure that the distinctiveness, the Britishness of the content that we make can be delivered to people in this country, and how to give them control, and how do you give them value for having that opportunity.
You've got the archives, haven't you, so that people can actually use it to help family members. Can you tell me some more about that?
Yeah, so there was RemArch.
RemArch, that's
absolutely,
it.
Yeah,
I was trying to get the words out.
The project was about looking at the power of memory. So this was actually, we had a number of projects over the course of about 2 years in different ways that led towards this, which was how do we give people, using the power of the archive and these incredible memories that we form around this content that we've produced over the years, how do we use that to help people, particularly in their later years, who may be suffering some kind of mental decline, who may have trouble remembering things. How do we give them something that is so kind of intrinsically valuable to them?
Take them back to a happy moment and an old memory.
And a memory that's so strong that it helps provide people with a grounding and understanding of where they are and what they who they are, and give family moments around BBC kind of BBC history. And there's another, I encourage people to look at what we're doing at the moment with the Morecambe and Wise show.
Oh right, no, I didn't know anything about that.
So this is very recent. This is an incredible story about how historically we didn't keep a lot of archive. That was for reasons of cost. It's very expensive to maintain old tapes. And so
storage.
Storage, absolutely. And also there wasn't seen as that much value in the content. It's interesting in parallels to internet at the moment. There's a lot of our internet youth that has evaporated.
Now we have everything everywhere and
but it's
information.
still evaporating though. So the loss of Flash. So Flash was an incredible part of the early days of video games on the web. With Flash disappearing largely, what happens to all that content is so much of it's gone, which is a great loss. But that happened many years ago. Doctor Who, Morecambe and Wise. They don't have the original Morecambe and Wise show as it appeared on the BBC after Left Eye TV. And so there was this kind of this business model where they would ship tapes around the world. You've got to read the story for kind of how they made those tapes, because it's crazy. But these tapes were shipped, around the world, and they were supposed to be destroyed at the end of their usable life.
Okay.
When all the kind of the opportunity to show it had gone and the contracts and licenses had run out.
I can imagine the size though that it would have actually taken up though, because we've come such a long way. I remember when I was at university, everything was big. Whether you were doing radio or TV, everything was big. So I can imagine that these films took some space up.
And I mean, how many of your university kind of like CDRs are still working? You know, how many of those kind of those discs?
I've not got damp.
In
a
garage.
know,
like just warped and melted, and now used as coasters, or kind of. I was given a CD of photographs very recently, and I was like, oh, this is great, and then I have no means in my house to actually get this off.
It's like finding old tapes, isn't it, from when you were young? You think, I'd love to listen to that actually.
Yep. Where I have a VHS tape in a drawer, and I'm like, that's a kind of. I should
put it on the wall.
Yeah, frame it. It'll probably look pretty good. But this tape from Morecambe and Wise, lost forever until it was found in the decaying shed of the Nigerian broadcaster, and they dug it out. And they were like, can we recover anything? And it was all mulched together and kind of half melted. And so they've been using advanced kind of X-ray scanning techniques to try and extract the original episode.
Incredible.
It is incredible. It's an amazing story. I encourage you to, people to go and check that out.
I'll definitely look into that.
Because, this is where we're at, kind of, and this is part of the consideration I have certainly with things like virtual reality. We captured a VR version of the Queen Vic, the pub from EastEnders. We went round, we took loads of photographs, and we rebuilt the pub as it was last year in virtual reality. And now this is an archive piece. So this is going into the BBC archive. It's our first virtual reality kind of archive submission. All of the objects that we scanned and created that represent this pub, because it's a set, it's a digital space, a digital representation of the set. And I kind of, virtual reality really at the time I first tried it, I just remember thinking, it's like, how can we give our audience the opportunity to be in the spaces that they recognise from the television? And that's something, these spaces don't exist. There are lights and there's no ceiling.
But to these people that watch these programmes every week, it is part of their lives. They're real to them.
Absolutely,
they watch it.
And so how do we give them that? How do we say this is that space? And so we have that. We have a VR Queen Vic, which we've now submitted to the archive.
I bet so many people will like going into that.
Absolutely.
Step in.
I hope so. And the kind of question for me is then fast forward with the REM arc of the future, allowing people to step into the old spaces. Maybe it's spaces.
What can we provide now, and what we can create now for the future?
Yeah. What can we save? Because digital content is so much of our lives. I mean, we've grown up with it.
And it's easier to save now. It's so much smaller.
Well, but you have to take a bet on.
Although, will it still work in the future?
How do we do that? And actually, those questions are really important and really interesting. That question of what is a virtual space? How do you preserve it? And how do you make sure it's there? Because if this accelerates, there are going to be virtual spaces that people embrace and remember in their memories as the places they've been. And virtual reality has a really strong kind of impact on that. I've played so many hours of video games. There are some video game worlds which I can mentally navigate around.
That is a lot of hours.
Yeah, well,
a lot of hours.
I know, but I kind of.
You can hear chuckles from the crew in the background who've probably done the same.
I think this is it. I mean, this is one of the reasons I kind of speak so passionately about video games. Is I grew up in these places. I grew up with these characters and these stories. I was saying earlier to one of the crew, the video game Halo is my Star Wars. That's the video game science fiction fairy tale experience I had, and that spaces and those places that I visited many hundreds of times. The release of the new Star Wars film, kind of, okay, I'll go and see it. It's exciting.
But that'd be the REM arc that you'd want in the future.
Yeah, I want to be able to visit a Halo ring. I want to go and stand, and it's that kind of take
you back to that moment and what you felt at the time.
Yeah, and the friends I was with, and those. I think if you take that as my experience, and then we fast forward for people who are growing up in a wholly digital world, where they are experiencing the world through lenses and filters of a digital screen, of digital kind of eye covering. If augmented reality over the next few years becomes something, we're going to have digital objects, digital places.
There's going to be so much more with regards to augmented reality, isn't there? There's a lot at the moment for training, for medical reasons.
Yeah, I mean, augmented reality, a lot of people bet on it being bigger than VR. And I feel like Yeah, but it's going to be for
It's a
really
risky bet, that. That's a
it's going to
risky
be
bet.
for really practical reasons. There is a lot of ways that we augment our reality with our smartphones already. Directions, kind of banking, even social media, all of these things. That will just shift to our heads-up display, and that's another reason I think video games have a head start, is that they've been designing navigation of digital objects in 3D spaces and heads-up displays for that kind of thing for years and years and years. So,
but also with regards to films, because with video games, what you do changes what's going to happen. But they say that with films, that's going to happen as well. Like I could sit next to you and watch a film in the future, they're saying, and it'd be a 4D experience. So our seats would move, they'd track our heart rate, they'd check how we were experiencing it, and they can actually change through headsets how we would then view the end of a film. You could end up seeing a completely different film ending than me, depending on our own reaction to it. But with VR, that allows us to do that. But also, computer games have been doing that long before other forms of media have been doing it, haven't they?
yeah, they have and they haven't. It's interesting because a lot of people they
It's
step
like
back.
taking a leaf out of their book. What have these been doing well? How can we then bring this to other forms of media?
I think you make a really good point in that you and I can both watch the same film and have different experiences. In fact, if we take kind of the reaction to recent films can be very different. I thought it was great. I thought I hated it. And
yeah, we were talking about that before. Everyone gets a different experience from different things.
and so you bring, and actually you get a different experience over your life. You bring yourself into that interaction. The difference is the media in front of you isn't changing. And we've got very married to the idea that this media doesn't change. That's a very short period in history where media has been unchanged and the singular vision. And I think that if you take the whole of human history and storytelling, and in fact we could have this conversation tomorrow, it would be different, even though the topic would be the same.
And we tell somebody else the conversation and it's slightly changed.
But it's still, it's the heart of it that's interesting. It's kind of, we're doing work on the origins of narrative and the origins of storytelling based on the history of cultures that have never had recorded media or had recorded media very late on. And looking at how traditional oral storytelling has been communicated. And that, a lot of that research is going towards understanding what is story and what is narrative and how can it change.
How can it be communicated?
Yeah, absolutely. And this idea of fixed media at fixed point, not responding. I think the opportunity of flexible media, not to take away from fixed media, is that it can provoke conversation in a new way. So we might both take a scene in a film or a television program and say, what did you think of that scene? Equally, we could go into an interactive experience and we can ask, what happened for you? What was different?
Both play a VR game and I'm terrible at it, so we'd both definitely get a different experience.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong in my mind about the kind of the discussions and the human interaction that comes out of that. Like, I'm really interested in how we use media to provoke conversation and we use media to provoke interaction, because I think that idea of people singularly interacting only with devices, never with real people, and kind of drawing away from one another is something that needs moving back to the human. And so this idea of hyper-personalization, which people are kind of in favor of or against, this idea of adaptive media for people, provoke strong reactions. So we're exploring it to understand what those reactions are, what we should or shouldn't do, and whether we can, in fact, promote healthy conversation, promote healthy debate.
Get people talking to each other again.
Yeah, well,
get your head out of your phone.
We've always been good at that. The BBC's always been part of the conversation, and I think that by trying to continue to be more aware of how much a part of the conversation we are, and kind of manage, curate, help, exchange ideas, and become more the fabric of the British conversation, and kind of support that and encourage it and make it healthy and sustainable. It's something that, if we can do it through media and through adaptive media and through kind of different levels of how do we ensure we trust media? There's a big topic at the moment.
I wonder if that could then be taken to the next level though. So with regards to data, if people were using things like the Remark and people had set it up for their family members because maybe they had dementia and they were like, let's take them back to the 30s, let's show them footage from then and see if it's like brings back any memories and how they felt at that time. If then other people had made the same settings in a different household, I wonder if then there could be then some kind of data sharing which we said, hold on, these people are going through the same things. I wonder if we can actually put things back into the community and connect all these different people, especially with regards to loneliness.
I think the very
And
fact
to take it to the next step, how can we change media and develop it?
Well, I think that the very fact that you have come up with that, how you're in thinking about that, is part of the success of what we're trying to attempt, because the opportunity you see...
What's the next step?
Yeah, well, the opportunity, you're seeing opportunity there for a way to tackle loneliness, a way to promote people having moments where they can share it, bringing the nation together. The BBC has always brought the nation
That's
together.
what I mean. I think it's something that the BBC always has done, but how can we then next take it in the future to the next level and connect people? Because obviously it'd be great, wouldn't it? So at the moment, just off the top of my head, if we were speaking to Alexa or any Google or any other
Anyone
operating
listening to
system,
this is just all their devices have gone off. That's
hello Alexa. So everybody listening, loads of people, like how many were sold last year? They were at the top of the Christmas list, like I said earlier in the show. You can connect and you can actually speak to these operating systems, and it's being shown in films, it's being in books. If you read Dan Brown's latest book, if you watch Her, which you'd recommended to me ages ago, all these different things about operating systems. But actually, rather than speaking to an operating system, oh, I remember this, oh, I wore those outfits, watching back things from like the 1930s, for example. But how about if we took it to the next point and that actually, can you connect me with somebody else that's watching this? Can you connect me to somebody else that's listening to this and has this view and they're watching the same area in the same time period? You know, to actually get people to actually feel how other people are feeling. That would be quite a nice step.
I think, yeah, I mean, what you're talking about there is community. And I think that the ability to build community around content, historical content, moments in people's lives, humans have always wanted to do that, and we've always found ways to do that. It's about facilitating that in a way that's wholesome and that it feels really good. And I think that absolutely there's opportunities to look at how we might do that. So the question of how do we get many hundreds of people in VR, millions of people connected in a digital space, that's part of the work we have to understand.
There's so many more options for the future though, isn't there?
There is, and I think that the way this stuff is evolving, is towards building community, and I think we recognise the world needs that. I think the questions around social media as a force for good versus a force for evil are really interesting questions, really interesting debates. This idea of the adaptive media that we're looking at, the object-based media.
It's a whole different show, isn't it?
Well, it is, and the interesting thing about it is that you might question why would we do it, and we do it because we need to explore it a little bit to understand it.
I think it's good to know what is good from something and what is bad and how we can make the changes to make things better.
Yeah, and we've done some work on the voice assistants. So we released an interactive radio drama, which is available on Amazon Echo and on Google Home, called The Inspection Chamber, which is an effort to look at how voice UI can provide new ways of interacting with content and experiencing media. Much the same
is that still available at the moment?
Yeah, that's absolutely available, and there's a whole team looking at that kind of stuff for the future. And I think voices, again, much like virtual reality and much like touch did years and years ago, is come and gone. And now it feels like basing the assistance in devices that people can purchase has led to a leap forward. I wouldn't say
your very own personal assistant.
Yeah, and people kind of, they're ambivalent about it, and they get something out of it or they don't get something out of it. But the idea, those smart homes, Internet of Things, they feel really kind of like a little bit clunky right now, and that's great.
But everything's going to adapt and change.
Exactly. I think we all remember our first smartphone or our first phone even.
I remember mine. It's
massive and kind of didn't work all the time and kind of didn't do that much, and maybe you just
you wanted different things from it. I was quite happy changing the cover, and that was a happy moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Kind of the personalisation of a media device, and then it was like, let's move to a single media device that only does very singular things, and then it was like, let's personalise that, and that's part of the interesting point of where these technologies start to pick up.
It's always good to look at where things were to see where they were going to, isn't it?
And I kind of in our many conversations always stand by that humans we use technology to amplify the behaviours that we have already, and the desires that we have, and once we get used to a base level and it's reliable, then we kind of move on and we bring more of our behaviours to bear. So I think that voice at the moment might feel hit and miss, but at some point it's just going to be
part of normal life.
And I hark back to Christmas, and my daughter, who's kind of 2.5, you know, she has never known a Christmas tree that didn't turn on by voice. Because I bought a plug that
We haven't got that in our home yet.
I bought a plug that I could, you know, talk to, and it was a novelty.
Christmas tree fairy turning it on.
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, historically, you know, your parents had those dial plugs that could turn a light on automatically, and they were pretty.
When you were going on holiday.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
things like that.
So this is kind of the internet connected version of that. You know, it feels like a lot of technology to smash into something quite simple, but that novelty of talking to the voice assistant and requesting that the Christmas tree turn the lights on, for a 2.5-year-old was just like
part of the magic of Christmas.
Whoa, you know, and you know, you can make the voice assistant bark like a dog, or make it sound like an elephant or a monkey or something like that, and that's part of her world right now.
Yeah, because that's what she's enjoying using.
Yeah, and like, well, and, you know, but it's just normal for her. Like,
but they're the audiences of the future.
Yeah, so 20 years time, if that's the state of voice right now,
then it's going to be their norm.
Yeah, you know, I grew up in a time where computers were introduced to the home. Like, that's insane. Like, I grew up before there were home computers, let alone mobile telephones or smart devices or any of this kind of stuff, before there were computers in homes.
Then when it came along, it was part of your journey and you enjoyed that and you've kept with it.
Yeah, and well, it became the thing I did.
Yeah.
You know, like the introduction of that technology to my home in a way that I could interact with it and the way that I could control gave me a career, gave me the opportunities.
Again, that goes back to Remark and what we've actually grown up with and what has been our normal, and then we've brought it into the future. It's like, my favourite programme as a child was Nightmare. And we were in the VR world, and I remember I wanted a robot, and I loved Johnny Five from Short Circuit. And I remember going to a well-known toy store and getting a little headset, and I was only very small, and it had a little screen that came over the front, and it had like virtual reality, but not how we know it today. It was like little red drawings. It was more like stick figures back then. But that was what I enjoyed, and now I'm very interested in virtual reality because I was interested in it back then, and it's something that it's great to see how it has progressed and how it has become part of the world.
Yeah, and how it will continue to grow and evolve.
For the future generations, what they've got now, it's only going to continue to grow.
And this is the thing, you know, I get questions about what do I do, what do I study, what should I learn?
Tech.
Well, very specifically, I think my recommendation is to learn a game engine. Because I think that understanding how to create things in three-dimensional space and interact with things in three-dimensional space, design for a three-dimensional space, is going to be a tremendous part, like huge part of our world. You know,
completely.
Understanding.
I think it's definitely going to continue to grow.
Yeah, and that's, you know, that's the thing is, and you know, we've had wonderful moments in VR Manchester with people who've come along. Rosie Summers in particular, incredible artist who took an interest in virtual reality and has recently produced her first kind of self-made virtual reality thing, having known nothing about game engines, nothing about kind of virtual reality, just having an interest, and is now a kind of a virtual reality creator.
Fantastic.
You know, and that's that's for me is kind of like I feel really super proud of the community for bringing that person's kind of talent and passion to life in this new medium, and I'd say. I look for that, you know, like the people who are growing up now who are looking at media, and it's like, look at object-based media, look at media that is software, look at games, look at game engines, 3D design, 3D interfaces, because there are going to be incredible jobs in the future.
And they're going to shape what we're doing.
Absolutely, you know, some of the things in this space right now will be digital objects in the future.
Especially pictures on walls and things like that.
And what does that mean? And you'll see a different picture, I'll see a different picture.
Very interesting to see where it's going.
I think, and it's incredibly exciting to be part of that journey and to be investigating it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for joining us today.
You're welcome. Thank you.
If you head over to our website, www.mediasoundwave.co.uk, and you go on the Meet the Expert section, you'll find more information about Si there and some links to the work that he's been doing. Thank you very much to everybody involved in today's show. Thank you for watching, and see you again soon here on Media Soundwave.